We are all used to seeing samurai as the heroes of beautiful movies, where they look nobly into the sunset and wave their swords gracefully. But historical reality was much harsher, dirtier, and completely unromantic. Let's start with the financial issue that ruined every warrior's life. Samurai were perhaps the only elite in the world paid in food. Their income was measured in koku. One koku, about 180 liters of rice, was supposedly enough to feed a grown man for exactly 1 year. It sounds reliable, but rice is a terrible currency. It is heavy, hard to store, and rots from humidity. Mice and rats eat it with gusto. The samurai received his sacks of grain and had to figure out how to turn them into money. Enter the merchants. They understood the warrior's hopeless situation perfectly. The exchange rate of rice to gold fluctuated constantly. If the year was bountiful, the price dropped and the samurai's salary depreciated instantly. A warrior could become a pauper simply because of good weather. Merchants profited from this for centuries. Samurai hated them, considering them parasites, but the proud warriors were forced to beg these parasites to buy their rice. As a result, most samurai lived in debt. It was a chronic disease of the entire class. They borrowed money against future harvests or property. It often reached the point of absurdity. A great warrior would pawn his family's sword. But since walking around unarmed was a crime and a disgrace, they ordered wooden or bamboo replicas. They put them in beautiful scabbards. On the outside, a menacing weapon. Inside, a useless stick. The main thing was to avoid a fight. If the deception was revealed, disgrace and seppuku awaited. To survive, warriors looked for side jobs, but working with your hands was considered humiliating, so they did it in deep secrecy. Samurai wove straw sandals, glued paper umbrellas, made lanterns, or carved toothpicks. All this happened at night, behind tightly closed shutters. The samurai's wife would secretly take the crafts to the shop. Neighbors were not supposed to know that the family of a hereditary swordsman was starving. Now let's talk about appearances. The famous samurai hairstyle, sakayaki, was a nightmare. The front of the head had to be shaved so the helmet would fit tighter. But even in peacetime, shaving was mandatory. Razors back then were dull, so hair was often simply pulled out with tweezers. The procedure was hellishly painful. The scalp was constantly inflamed and dirty, forming pustules. The head itched unbearably, but scratching in public was a breach of etiquette. Hygiene was even worse. Bathing daily in medieval Japan was a luxury, and on military campaigns, it was impossible. Now remember the armor. Japanese armor is a complex construction of lacquered leather or metal tied with silk cords. Inside that shell, it was incredibly hot. The humid Japanese climate made the warrior sweat continuously. Sweat soaked into the silk cords and leather lining. You couldn't wash the armor because water destroyed the lacquer. So, it accumulated sweat and dirt for decades. The smell from a formation of samurai was monstrous. Lice and fleas felt perfectly at home in the gear, biting warriors during battles or parades. You couldn't flinch. Discipline required complete stillness. The samurai had to stand with a stone face while insects ate him. Weapons also caused problems. The katana in pop culture is a super weapon, but reality was more prosaic. Japan has poor iron ore, full of sulfur and phosphorus. Blacksmiths had to perform miracles to get decent steel, yet swords often turned out fragile. If you hit a hard object incorrectly, the sword could break or bend. Furthermore, the sword rusted instantly in the humid climate. A rusty sword was a symbol of shame. The samurai was obliged to care for the blade daily, a tedious ritual of disassembling, cleaning, and oiling. If you were tired or sick, the sword wouldn't forgive you. In the morning, you would find rust. Polishing a sword cost astronomical money. A poor samurai simply didn't have the funds for it. That is why many were afraid to use the sword for its intended purpose. If you cut down an enemy, you have to pay the polisher. No money? Better to avoid the conflict. The menacing weapon became an expensive accessory that was scary to take out of the scabbard. The famous code of honor is also a myth. There was no single Bushido rulebook in the Middle Ages. The concept became popular and took shape only in the early 20th century as a propaganda tool. In real history, samurai betrayed each other constantly. In the Sengoku period, loyalty was an empty phrase. Vassals killed lords. Lords set up vassals. Everyone looked for profit. The survivor was not the most honest, but the most cunning. But if a samurai decided to follow the path of honor, a nightmare awaited him. His life did not belong to him. The Lord could order him to die on a whim. The ritual of seppuku was torture. The stomach is a cluster of nerve endings. A man had to cut open his own abdominal cavity from left to right, then upward. The pain caused blackouts. To keep it aesthetic, a kaishakunin assistant stood by to decapitate the warrior at the moment of agony. But the head couldn't roll on the floor, that was dirty. It had to hang by a flap of skin. This required virtuoso skill. If the assistant missed, it was a disgrace. Often a best friend was asked to do it. Imagine the stress. Killing your friend perfectly while he writhes in pain. The woman's lot in the samurai class was even harder. A woman was a political instrument. The father was only interested in a profitable marriage. The husband could be an old man or a sadist, and the wife had to endure. Only the husband could initiate divorce. If the wife did not bear a male heir, she could be sent back to her parents in disgrace. Women had their own ritual called jigai. They cut the arteries in their neck. Before this, the woman had to tie her ankles together. This was done so that in the death convulsions, her legs would not spread apart. Even dying from blood loss, the woman had to think about decency. The pose of the corpse was more important than life. The peaceful Edo era became a golden cage. There were no wars for 250 years. A huge army of professional killers was left without work and retrained as bureaucrats. Stern warriors sat in offices, copying tax records and monitoring dam repairs. It was boring, but they were obliged to wear 2 swords and make a menacing face. Life was regulated to the smallest detail. Laws dictated what fabric could be used for clothes, what you could eat for lunch, and where you could walk. A step to the left was rebellion. A step to the right was disrespect. The samurai lived in constant fear of violating protocol, which could lead to confiscated property or forced suicide. There was the right of kirisut-gomen, the right to kill and leave. A samurai could kill a commoner for an insult. In theory, it sounds menacing. In practice, it was a trap. After the killing, an investigation began. Witnesses had to be found, and it had to be proven that the insult was unbearable. If there wasn't enough evidence, the samurai was executed as a murderer. Often, warriors endured the mockery of rich merchants to avoid the deadly bureaucracy. A separate caste of losers was the Ronin samurai without a master. These were not romantic lone heroes. They were outcasts. They had no home, no salary, and no rights. Peasants feared them. Other samurai despised them. Ronin formed gangs, robbed travelers, and ruined villages. Often they died of hunger under fences or froze to death in winter. Their bodies were thrown into pits. No honor. Only cold and hunger. The hostage system finished off clan economies. The shogun required feudal lords daimyo to live in the capital every other year. When the lord went home, his family remained in the capital as hostages. If the lord rebelled, his family was executed. The samurai serving the lord also lived between 2 homes. Moving these daimyo processions was ruinous. Hundreds of samurai walked for weeks. Lodging and food on the road were expensive. At the same time, you had to look rich new clothes, new harness. It was a show that devoured the budget. Samurai skimped on food to buy new sandals for a ceremonial entry into the city. Medicine of that time was barbaric. Wounds in battle often led to death from infection. The concept of sterility did not exist. A doctor might wash a wound with river water or apply manure. Wounds were cauterized with hot iron without anesthesia. The most they could offer was rice vodka, which didn't help much when they were sawing off your leg. Diseases killed samurai more often than enemies. The main scourge was beriberi, caused by eating polished white rice which lacks vitamin B1. Samurai considered white rice a status symbol, while peasants ate healthy brown rice. The elite grew weak and suffered nerve damage, the Edo disease. Syphilis and gonorrhea were also rampant in red light districts. With no condoms, these were treated with mercury, poisoning the patients slowly until they went insane. Samurai childhood was cruel. Training began at age 5. Boys were woken before dawn. In winter, they were forced to run barefoot in the snow. They were sent to the graveyard at night to fight fear. For any fault, they were beaten with a stick. Teachers could beat students half to death, and parents would only add more. People grew up with suppressed psyches, knowing how to endure pain, but not how to enjoy life. Living in samurai houses was terribly uncomfortable. A traditional house is a frame of wood and paper with thin sliding partitions. In winter, the temperature inside was freezing. Drafts blew through the whole house. Charcoal braziers provided little heat, but risked carbon monoxide poisoning. Fires were the scourge of wooden cities. Edo was called the City of Fires. Houses went up like matches, destroying entire districts. A samurai could wake up to a fire alarm and grab only his sword. Everything else, clothes, furniture, food burned. A man was left on the ashes, forced to build a house again and get into debt again. Personal life in a paper house did not exist. Servants and family heard every conversation. Sex had to be quiet. Any quarrel became public knowledge. The samurai was always on display and couldn't relax even in his own bedroom. Old age was sad. Pensions didn't exist. All hope lay in sons. When the head of the family retired, Inkyo, he handed control of the money to his son and became a dependent. If the relationship was bad, the old man lived in hunger. If there were no sons, the clan took the property, and the elderly ended up on the street. So, the life of a samurai is not a path of glory. It is a path of deprivation, pain, and eternal fear. Fear of superiors, poverty, and disgrace. They were hostages of the system they guarded. Behind the beautiful armor hid sick, hungry, and unhappy people.